Perfect. Thank you. So welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on a Friday morning. I know it's the end of the week, so again, we'll be efficient with everyone's time. I'm Arian Olish. I'm the Executive Director for the Office of Student and Faculty Innovation at WVU. Just for some context, because I know sometimes it gets confusing with different offices in the university. So I report directly to the Vice President of Research. So we are within the research office, work very closely with the other units in that office as well, including the technology transfer office. And then the launch lab also is rolled up under our office as well. So it's a great kind of connection of resources in the entrepreneurship and innovation space. We wanted to have this webinar for a couple reasons. We are a newer office to campus, and so we want to just make sure everybody knows who we are, but also just help everybody understand what it is we do and where we can help you and plug in resources and support and programming, that sort of thing. So I'll invite you, if you have questions, if you want to either interrupt me, that's okay, or drop them in the chat, and Jessica can either read them out during or at the end of the presentation. Like I mentioned, there should be plenty of time at the end for questions as well. There are some meatier slides as we go through. You'll notice I'm not going to read word for word, but we did want to put content in because we'll send these slides out as well, just as a resource for anybody who would find that helpful. Okay. So our Office of Student and Faculty Innovation. So what do we do? Really at the core of it is we help you find and help you along your innovation path. So we want to be here to connect you to resources. We want to be here to help you navigate internal processes and procedures and policies related to innovation and entrepreneurship. We want to provide educational opportunities and resources around grant funding and company operations and company development, especially for our faculty members and our students. And again, really provide that programming and education component. So we have broken down what we're calling kind of this broader Mountaineer innovation ecosystem into 3 steps, and they are 3 ascending steps, if you want to think of it like that, along the innovation pathway. And we'll take you through each of these, but it basically is moving from ideate, which is the point where you initially are conceiving the idea, through innovate, where you're really refining and building that idea into something that's valuable, and then create, which is when you would actually be taking that idea, taking it on the next step, perhaps taking it out of the university through a startup company or through commercializing it, whatever that might look like. So what we've done is we've binned our resources under each of these steps. And again, we're here to help guide you along those different steps and help identify, when the time is right to move from one stage to the next. Sometimes people think that maybe they're a little bit farther along than they actually are on their innovation journey. And that's okay. We just want to make sure that you're not missing critical foundational levels or layers, so that when you're building a product or a technology or an idea or a business, you actually are building towards a successful one. So at the ideate stage, again, this is really where you have identified a problem and you have identified a solution to that problem. Okay, so maybe you're a clinician, maybe you're a researcher, you have some sort of problem that you have identified in the real world, and you now have built an idea. And built can be, you're still at a very early stages. You don't have to have actually something truly built at this stage, but you've developed an idea for how you could create a solution to that problem. There's 3 main resources here that we want to highlight that are really helpful at this ideate stage. So if you are a student, your primary point of contact at this stage is the launch lab. And so the Morris L. Hayhurst Launch Lab, their physical space is over in the Crossings building on the Evansdale campus on the 4th floor. And that's a wonderful set of resources. They help coach people through the business model canvas. They run pitch competitions. They have a maker lab there with 3D printers. They have a media studio where they do recordings and photo shoots and design work, that sort of thing. So great set of resources there. Again, they're really going to help you at that very early stage. If you're a faculty member or you have university-owned intellectual property, the Technology Transfer Office is your first stop. That is your front door on your innovation journey. And again, we're always more than welcome or more than happy to connect you in with those resources, but just for kind of everybody's awareness and education. So the Technology Transfer Office on campus is really here to help protect any intellectual property that is owned or created by the university or its employees. So they will work on determining whether your idea is patentable, what the landscape looks like in terms of its commercialization potential. They will connect in with licensing partners where appropriate and when appropriate. So they really kind of encapsulate a lot of the business processes around intellectual property for the university. The last resource we'll talk about at the ideate stage is our NSF I-Core program. So that program is run out of our office here at WVU. We are partners with a larger hub that is run out of Cornell. So that's the Interior Northern Hub, is the group that we belong to. There's about 12 colleges, universities that all belong to that, including University of Pittsburgh, Cornell, a lot of the SUNY schools. So really great set of partners that we have there. That program, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but it is open to anyone in West Virginia. So you do not have to be affiliated with a university, although most of you on the call today probably are, which is great. But the program is really designed for tech innovators to help you think about creating valuable products, use-inspired products. Moving down then to the innovate stage. So you've identified a problem, you've identified a solution. Now it's build, test, and build again. And what we mean by this is it's really about refining your idea at this point, refining it so that it actually is creating value for a potential customer. The worst thing that we see in entrepreneurship and innovation is somebody who spends years and lots of money developing an idea that at the end of the day, there's no customer for that product or design. Okay. So we want to help make sure that you are validating your idea along the way, finding that customer and really identifying that product market fit is how we refer to it. So again, the Launch Lab here is incredibly helpful. Again, they're through their pitch competitions, their business coaching, they do a lot of this work. For further prototyping, again, I mentioned the Launch Lab has a great resources. The Lane Innovation Hub is another fantastic asset that we have on campus. They have really advanced manufacturing, 3D printing, and machining work, a lot of electrical work there. So if you're not familiar with the Lane Innovation Hub, I would really suggest that you, at minimum, check out their website. They've got some great resources there. And then the third thing I'll mention is the NSF program, the I-Core program again, but not at the regional level, at the national level. And again, I'll talk through those specifics a little bit more in a minute. But at the national level, basically, you're getting more exposure to doing what we call customer discovery. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so you've identified a problem and a solution. You've now tested whether or not that solution that you've created actually has a place in the market, and you've determined that it does. What's next after this? Well, this is where you get to the create phase. And this is really taking your ideas and turning them into opportunities. So for some people, that might be launching a startup company or a small business. We are very fortunate in West Virginia to have an amazing ecosystem of resource providers around entrepreneurs and innovators. Those are all collected on the West Virginia Business Link website. Again, if you are interested in this space and you've never visited that website, just Google West Virginia Business Link. It'll be the first one that comes up. It's a searchable database of all entrepreneurial resources within the state of West Virginia. So I think there's right now over 150 resource providers. You can filter by if you're looking for business coaching, if you're looking for loan programs, if you're looking for assistance or mentorship in a specific technical area. There's a bunch of different filters you can use on that Business Link website to find and connect in with the resource that's most helpful for you. Really wonderful resource. The next thing that I'll talk about is our SBDC, which is our Small Business Development Center. We have some fantastic SBDC coaches. Typically, if you're a faculty member or a student and you come to me and you say, I want to start a company, the first thing I'm going to do is going to refer you to an SBDC coach. They will sit down with you, and in an hour, they will take you through the entire process of getting your company registered through the state of West Virginia. It's an amazingly simple process that we have in West Virginia because they've really streamlined it. So great resource, great tool there. Bridging Innovation is the next thing I'll talk about. So Bridging Innovation is kind of our state's culmination once a year event around entrepreneurship and innovation. It's typically a day or two of programming talks by the different resource providers, lots of pitch competitions. If you are in the innovation or entrepreneurship space in the state, Bridging Innovation I can't recommend going to that event enough. It's great. It's a great way to connect, meet with people, that sort of thing. And then SBIRs, STTRs, we'll talk about a little bit in a minute. The West Virginia Jobs Investment Trust is something else I want to mention. It's also on the Business Link website. But it's a great resource. They provide funding for some of our, small businesses in the state of West Virginia. Terrible timing. I woke up with a cold this morning, so I'm sorry. My voice is going in and out a little bit. Okay, so I mentioned the NSF I-Corps program before, and I mentioned that it's broken down into 2 phases. So there's a regional course and then a national course. The regional course is about 3.5 weeks long. It's part-time. I would say 10 hours a week-ish is a good kind of estimate. So it's designed for people who have a full-time job, are working full-time, but it's really focused around designing or designed around teaching how to create value-driven products. So what do I mean by this? The National Science Foundation, maybe 15 years ago, realized that they were pumping millions of dollars into basic research, but none of those technologies they were helping develop were ever actually translating into commercial markets. And they realized a lot of it was just a lack of viewpoint of researchers to understand creating products only works if you're doing it from the lens of the customer that will buy that product. So what NSF I-Corps program really drives you to do is it's a very scientific approach to entrepreneurship. You come up with hypotheses around whether or not your product is solving a problem. And then you go and you take it out and you actually do customer interviews and you determine whether or not your product is actually providing value to somebody. It's a fantastic program. The regional course is required for the national I-Corps program, which I'll talk about in a second. We ask that you do around 30 customer interviews, and we help coach you through that process and teach you what's a good interview question and kind of the tips and tricks that you need to really make it a valuable experience. We are running, we just were refunded at the end of 2022 to run this program for another 4 years, which is fantastic because again, it's completely free for people to attend and participate in. One of the added benefits that we are doing with the refunding is we're running now hybrid courses. So although most of our courses are still virtual, once or twice a year, what we're doing is a hybrid version where we're actually starting with a couple days of virtual work. And then we're taking all of our teams in that cohort to a conference, so to a sector-specific conference. So the cohort we're running right now is all around energy. So we opened it up this week. We did 3 days of virtual classes with the teams. And then in 2 weeks, we're taking all of our teams to Washington, D.C. to the ARPA-E Summit, which is a big culmination of energy funded work, energy companies, kind of everything around the energy sector. The purpose of doing that is now we're going to give people the opportunity to actually do customer discovery in person and connect in network. So really fantastic opportunity. The next in-person or next hybrid one that we're doing is going to be around life sciences and biotech. And so we're going to take all of our teams to the annual bio conference in Boston in June. So again, wonderful opportunity. And those trips are completely paid for as well. So there's no concern in terms of having either personal or grant funding to cover those trips. Our next virtual cohort is going to run June 5th through June 28th. We don't have our applications open quite yet. We're going to get through another couple cohorts, but you can check our website for when those applications will be open. And as always, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Jessica or anybody else on our team if you have questions about I-Corps or you want to learn more. Okay, the national course, I'll just talk about this very briefly. So if you do regionals and you qualify for nationals, it is a competitive process, but it's a great opportunity. It is 8 weeks long. The time commitment goes up significantly. So be aware of that. It's 20 to 25 hours a week, and you do have to have 3 team members. You have to have a technical lead, which is typically our faculty member, or maybe a postdoc, an entrepreneurial lead, and then an industry mentor as well. So somebody who's kind of been within the sector that your technology is applicable to. During that 8-week course, you do 100 customer interviews. So much more intensive customer discovery there, but again, great opportunity. There is a $50,000 stipend that will cover your time and any travel expenses during that 8-week period. So again, great opportunity. It's a really great program to test out whether or not you really kind of have, again, a product that's meeting the needs of a customer. It's also a good way to kind of gut check. If you think you're interested in doing the startup route, we almost always suggest people do this first. Doing a startup company, there's a lot involved to it. There's a lot in terms of time commitment, conflict of interest. There's a lot of moving parts. So if you struggle to get through an 8-week course at this kind of commitment level, we use that as a way to gut check people as to whether or not a startup company is really the right decision for them. Okay. For startup companies and small businesses, there are these grants called SBIR and STTR grants, and that's a lot of what our office does in terms of, again, helping folks navigate policies and procedures around these grants. These are non-dilutive funding mechanisms. So by that, what I mean is, unlike taking money from an angel investor, a venture fund, something like that, where they're going to then own part of your company, these are grants that are given to the company. There is no repayment requirement and there is no equity stake when you get one of these grants. Phase ones are up to $250,000 depending on funding agency. Phase two can go up to about $1.5 million, again, plus or minus there depending on the agency. There are some differences between grants and contracts, which I won't get into now, but these funds are awarded through 11 different federal funding agencies. So the ones we see the most are typically Department of Energy, Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health. Those are kind of our big ones, but USDA, Department of Transportation, Department of Education also have programs. NASA also has a program. So 11 in total there. And again, it's non-dilutive funding, but it's for research and development. Now, the really important thing to know and understand, especially for somebody who's at the university about these grants, these are not university awards. These are not intended to be university or academic research awards. These are awards made to a private small business outside of a university to develop technology that small business has a technology that they can either own or operate on. Okay. So sometimes I think people see these grants and they think, oh, I can get this and I can support my academic lab. No, definitely not the case with these grants. You can subaward money to your academic lab or to a academic lab. I shouldn't even say your academic lab. You can subaward to an academic lab. Okay. But there are, again, some provisions and controls set in there because we always have to go back and remember the fact that these awards are made to a small business. They're not made to a university. And so we need to be very careful, especially in terms of conflicts of interest, of who is on the company side and then who would be on that subaward or subcontractor side. All right. I think I kind of already went over a lot of this again, but just kind of some highlights here. Individuals can't be paid on both the small business and the university side. Okay, so that's a really important thing, again, to keep in mind. That's not a WVU rule. That is a federal government rule. And your small business and you will get in a lot of trouble if that rule is not followed. For a phase two grant, so phase one, there's a little bit more flexibility, again, depending on the agency. Phase two grants require a fully operational business. What does that mean? That means your business actually can stand on its own 2 feet. It is not just a shell company. It is not fully operating out of the university. It is not operating out of kind of like a phantom address. Okay, you have to actually have a legitimate business when you're going after phase two grants. Phase twos are a guaranteed audit at that stage. And we have been seeing really increased amounts of scrutiny on these applications to ensure that, again, these grants are not being abused or there's no fraud or waste going on with these funding mechanisms. So it's a great funding mechanism when the situation and the scenario is right. Again, myself, Jessica, I know Joy Edwards, who's director of our conflicts of interest office, we're all working collectively on how we as a university best navigate faculty members participating on these grants. So if you ever have any questions, just please reach out to us. We're more than happy to have a conversation with you about them. The thing that we don't like to see is somebody that gets 6 months into working on one of these grants, or maybe they get one of these grants and they've missed a whole bunch of steps along the way. And now we have to kind of go back and undo a lot of work. So have conversations with us at the beginning, not at the end. It will make everybody's life a lot easier. Resources. This is all on our website as well, but the SBIR and STTR website, they host a ton of informational webinars. It's a great tool. If you are interested in a specific funding agency, get on, you can filter through those. I would highly recommend educate yourself as much as possible on these grants before you think about going after one of them. Okay. We have, there's some other, just kind of mentioning some other resources as well. Again, I mentioned our SBDC. If you're new to SBIRs and STTRs and your company thinks that they want to go after one, there's a couple consulting agencies out there. We do not recommend or endorse any consultant agencies, but we do have a list of ones that we are aware of, and we can certainly send you that information as well. As a university, we are also part of something called the Accelerator Network. That is a grant, an STTR grant that was funded by NIH, and that does give people access to SBIR and STTR coaching. So if you're interested in that and you're within kind of the life science, health science domain area, feel free to reach out and I can connect you in with that resource as well. Okay, this is our conflicts of interest slide. So I am going to ask Joy Edwards again. She's the director of our conflicts of interest office. If she can kind of just say a few words about the conflicts of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Ariane was kind of mentioning to everyone, there are a few things that we need to be very careful with when we move forward with not just startups, but particularly these SBIR, STTR funding mechanism projects. There are things, because you are also a state employee, for those of you who are faculty members, and we'll be working from the university side, that we need to be a little more particular about than we would with someone just from the outside, with a small business that already exists, that wants to work on a technology and potentially subaward the university and doesn't really have any other connection to the university otherwise. So conflicts of interest are pretty inherent in collaborations with the university and those companies, but especially when that investigator has a significant financial interest. Those conflicts can arise when a university employee who owes their primary responsibility to the university as an employee has a significant financial interest in a company, whether that be ownership or has developed the IP that has been licensed to that company. When they engage in either the company or the university side of research or work, those concerns are right here as kind of listed. That potential for the research to be viewed as biased or not objective, since the investigator could have a financial benefit from the outcome of that research, due to those interests in or the relationships with that company. As well as then the intellectual property resulting from that research, for which then the company would be the commercial vehicle. Then the potential for that blurring of the nonprofit for-profit boundary, in that, we have tax-exempt facilities that could be used in a way that could competitively advantage a for-profit company. And also the potential for PIs to use university space, personnel, resources to benefit that company portion of research that goes on. And those are difficult things to navigate through. They may sound a little easier to say, here, I'm going to do this project and here's all the ways that I'm going to separate it. Working with a small business, especially, having a startup is a very difficult task for those who are, full-time entrepreneurs, but to do that in addition to the responsibilities and duties that you have as a university employee and a faculty member is a very heavy load. To also add into that a research project that can become kind of quite complicated as to whose side are you working for, where is the work being done. There are just a lot of variables, and these can look very different from agency to agency and from project to project, just dependent upon kind of the state of your business already, the amount of employees you have, do you have your own space? There's lots of questions, lots of variables, and we are happy, more than happy to work with you guys as soon as possible on these, because we have seen great success in these when they are set up properly. And they are, as Arian has described, a really great opportunity, but there's certifications that are made to the federal government by the small business. So there's only so much that WVU can do to kind of help after the fact. So we want to keep you safe. We want to keep WVU safe. We want to keep the research safe. And of course, everyone's reputation's safe here. So we do want to make sure that we're being very clear in delineating, who's doing what and what kind of support is being provided. So we're happy to help. As Arian also said, we are working on some comprehensive guidance that we can share, that we'll have up online, that will help you guys get through this. But certainly, any questions, shoot my way.
Great, thanks so much, Joy. So like Joy mentioned, we've been working really over the last couple of years to create these faculty startup guidelines. This is not something, I do like to stress this is not something that we just created kind of in our own little bubble or vacuum. Both Joy and I and a couple other folks have really looked at probably best practices from, I would say, at least 20 other institutions that manage this process very well. And so we took that and, identified what would work for WVU, what didn't work for WVU, and came up with these faculty guidelines. So we do have these guidelines now. We can send them out. We can't publish them to our website just because of accessibility reasons, but a lot of the information is up on our website. So kind of the high level, but if you'd like a PDF version of the full guidelines, we're always more than happy to send those out. One thing that we tell people to do from the get-go, if you're interested as a faculty member and you're potentially interested in a startup company or anything like that, we have an intake form on our website now. We ask that you fill that out. That helps gives us kind of a understanding of a starting point of where you are, so we can understand how to best help you. So we'll use that intake form as a way then to schedule a follow-up call with you as well. And again, kind of talk through where you're at, what you're thinking about doing. So again, we can kind of help provide you there. Somebody else have control of the screen, Jess? Okay, well, we'll just keep going. There's some helpful information. I'm not going to read through all of it, but there is, things in terms of using on-campus lab space, negotiations, that sort of thing, really helpful information that you should be aware of, again, if you're potentially going to do a startup company or anything like that. Okay. All right. We also have a checklist. This is, and I'm not sure where this blue squiggly line came from, but that's okay. We'll just keep going. We have a faculty startup checklist. Again, this is our effort to try and help you help this process be more transparent and easier for you to understand. So the checklist is just things like, again, things that you should be doing if you are going through this process. This is part of our faculty guidelines document, but again, we're happy to send this out independently as well. This is also published on our website. Okay, we also have put together, again, just for kind of to help you all in this process, if you go down this road, a suggested timeline. This is not, again, agencies differ. Some agencies, you need to give yourself more leeway than others. But it's just a suggested guideline with certain points and things that happen along the way. One thing, again, that we are keeping a close eye on, and Jessica and I will be working on putting out a PDF to our faculty members about some of the increased levels of scrutiny and regulations at the federal level on these grants. There was a lot of work done when reauthorization for SBIRs and STTRs happened back in October of 22. So we're putting together informational material on that so you can be aware. But one of the things that we need faculty members to do now, if you are either a subcontractor or your small business is an applicant on these, the allocation of rights have to be completed before your grant application goes in. It's a really, really important step. So again, that's a very nuanced thing. A lot of you won't understand what that means, and that is okay. But if you are at that point and you have any questions, please reach out to me and we can help navigate you through that. All right, we're about finished up. And again, I want to make sure we have plenty of time for people to ask questions. A couple upcoming events I want to mention. I mentioned Bridging Innovation. That is coming up in a few, I guess a little over a month. That's in Wheeling this year, April 17th through 21st. Wonderful access to resources, conversations, meeting people, networking, pitch events, all of that sort of things. I will highlight, if you are a veteran or a family member of a veteran, or veterans who are entrepreneurial, we've got a great veterans pitch competition I think there's close to $40,000 in technical business assistance and prize money that will be given out. If you are interested in that, let me know. I can connect you in with more details there. But there's the registration link for Bridging Innovation. Again, if you're interested, registration I think is $25. It's pretty cheap, and it's a great event. Our office also hosts the annual Evolving Energy Conference. Some of you might know this conference by its former name, which was TransTech. We rebranded last year because there's a lot of shifting momentum and interest regarding the energy sector in Central Appalachia and West Virginia. So we rebranded to kind of stay in line with those trends. We had a wonderful turnout last year. We were super excited. There was great energy, excuse that pun, in the room. We are thrilled to host it again this year. We are working on solidifying a date, but it will be in the fall. We're also working on what the topics will be for this year, but we normally do about a day to a day and a half conference. There'll be a pitch competition and a keynote speaker, and then a full day programming the following day. That will be in Morgantown again this year. So check our website or visit transtechenergy.wvu.edu for more information to stay up to date there as well. The last thing I'll mention, I mentioned this at the very beginning. One of the things that our office likes to do is provide programming opportunities for you all to, again, just become more educated on different types of innovation and entrepreneurial grant funding. So we are hosting on April 12th at 11 a.m. We've got a wonderful gentleman who's one of the program directors at ARPA-E who's going to be talking about ARPA-E funding. If you aren't familiar with ARPA-E, this is within the energy sector, energy domain. Great funding mechanism. So if you are unfamiliar, but you work in the energy sector, or you are familiar and you want to learn kind of best practices on what those grants look like and how you can get more involved, highly recommend attending that session. We've got our Eventbrite link there. Jessica will also be sending out after the webinar today, or sometime early next week, announcements about that with a flyer that'll have the registration link as well. After that, we don't have a date yet. We're working on solidifying that, but we will be running a couple webinars related to specific state resources for small businesses. Again, that'll be our SBDC coaches. We also have an SBIR STTR matching fund in the state of West Virginia, which is wonderful. A lot of states don't have that, but they'll be sharing information about how to get involved with that program as well. So again, I hope kind of this presentation gave everybody a good sense of, again, we are here to, the way we think of it is insulate the pipeline. We've got innovators, we've got great entrepreneurs, we've got great technology coming out of the university. We just want to make sure that you're getting access to the resources you need to be successful. So as always, please reach out with any questions. Also, if you are part of a department, college, division, and you think a presentation like this would be helpful for your specific unit, we are always more than happy to schedule kind of one-off smaller sessions, smaller presentations. We can spend more time on Q&A or drill into specific topics if you're interested. So really appreciate everyone's time today. I'll go ahead and turn my screen share off, but then would invite anybody with questions to go ahead and chime in at this point. Okay, so we've got a question here. I'll go ahead and read it out loud just so everybody can hear it. They say, I'm a novice at this opportunity. Can SBIRs, STTRs, or other opportunities at WVU and in the state be internationally associated? So I think there's a second question there, but let me start with the first one. It depends on what you mean by associated. So SBIRs and STTRs have to be owned, they have to be U.S. registered companies and owned by U.S. citizens. So there is that requirement there. In terms of affiliated with international organizations or other groups, again, it depends to what extent and in what the scenario is. Certain federal agencies do not allow it. Other federal agencies allow it, but they cap it at a certain percent. So let's say you're working here and you want to subcontract to a group in France. Some federal agencies will have a 10% cap on you can only subaward or subcontract 10% of your award to that external agency. how does it work in terms of conflicts of interest, and are there any? Yeah, so again, conflicts of interest, again, that would probably be situation to situation, again, just dependent on, if you or a family member have any stake or relationship or interest in a non-US company. I don't think it looks that much different for international versus US national companies for conflicts of interest, but things like export control do become more of a question there. And again, the first stopgap there is whether or not the funding agency will even allow you to do it. So if there's a specific funding agency you're curious about, you're, again, always welcome to send Jessica and I a message or fill out our intake form. That might be the easiest thing. And then we can look through that specific agency requirements and give you some feedback on that as well. Any other questions from anyone? Well, if there's no other questions, Jessica and I can hang around for a few extra minutes just in case anybody wants to touch base one-on-one. Let's see, to innovation or business related to the role of faculty members. Oh, okay, good question. So this question basically is about if you have an innovation or business related to the role of that faculty member, but what if it's not related? So what if a faculty member has like a real estate business? Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I'll also ask Joy to weigh in here if she has kind of a good sense. So our IP policy is in our Board of Governors rules 1.5. Thinking that's the right one. Yeah, 1.5. And it outlines exactly what it means for something to be university owned. Typically, intellectual property only applies to a faculty member when it is within the domain that they were hired in. So if you are, let's say, an immunologist, microbiologist, and you have a real estate company, that would be outside of that intellectual property rule. But if you have specific questions on it, we can always certainly talk about that, connect in with our general counsel office. Now, that does not, though, avoid any of the COI issues. So if you have a small business outside the university, even if it's unrelated to your work at the university, we do still want to make sure that everything related to conflict of interest there is managed and is appropriate. Joy, did you want to maybe add anything onto that?
Sure. So you would really be looking at more of the conflict of commitment, especially if there's not going to be necessarily research that you would be involved in, if there's not really a research overlap, if you're getting an SBIR or STTR funded project for, say, something outside of your scope of work and your kind of institutional responsibilities here, there we would still be looking at your time commitments, personnel. Is anybody else being used? Are you even working on the project at all, or is this something that you're just coming, to develop and completely external small business that will really have no overlap? It's there's, again, it's one of those it depends questions. There's a lot of variables, so it's kind of a very situational decision making that goes on. That certainly makes it easier if it is something that's not related to your institutional responsibilities in that way. But there's still things that you will have to kind of get approval for the time, for engaging in making sure that there's no overlap in use of our resources. But it's easier, but there are still a few little issues that we need to talk about. So certainly I'm available. Any questions? Mike, did you have a question? I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I had a just quick question. So if I'm interested in applying for an SBIR, and I want to separate myself from the process so there's no conflict of interest, do I have to separate myself from the process before I apply for the SBIR? Or is it only, let's say, if it gets awarded? Because obviously not everything's awarded.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It really is about managing that process before the grant application goes in. And the reason I say that is, again, if we remember the context of these awards, these are awards made to the small business, which means if you are the owner of the company and you are doing the work to prepare the grant application, right, then that is work on behalf of the company, not on behalf of the university. So one of the things that we want to make sure folks do before they start preparing their application is they get outside consulting approval from either their chair or their dean. That basically just makes sure that your chair or dean, your supervisor, is aware that you are taking on a commitment outside of your university responsibilities, and everybody's just kind of is aware and is good with that process. Does that help answer the question? Maybe I'll pause there before
I think so. It's my chair that's dither about this, because he doesn't want me to stop teaching if I'm going to apply for an SBIR. So he says, if you can continue teaching, that would be wonderful. So I said,
yeah,
I guess the question.
And again, I mean, that comes down to more management, a time management thing, right? Ensuring that work that you're doing for the company is not done during work hours, is not using university resources, right? So like, you're not using your WVU email address. You're not using, we couch it as a de minimis amount. We understand, listen, somebody might call you for your business and it's in the middle of the day and you have to pick up the phone and tell them you'll call them back, later. But it's kind of, we don't want people using university time, resources, or efforts to, again, help benefit their small business.
Okay. Yeah. I think that makes it reasonably clear.
Okay. Yeah. Happy to follow up if, I'm going to drop my email into, actually, Jessica, can you drop the office email? That'd be great. That'd be super. We've got another question. Mike, did you have any other questions? I'm sorry, before I...
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, super. Got another question here. How do we establish a small business? So again, that establishing the small business can be done through the SBDC. It looks like you've got some more here. Since faculty members are fully employed, they can't establish a business and have ownership. No, they can. You can establish a business and you can have ownership. Again, it just comes down to managing any potential conflict. If you apply for or receive an SBIR STTR award, having ownership of a company who's contracting work to a lab that you also oversee is not something that the federal government would allow you to do. So there has to be a separation. So let's say you're a faculty member, you've got a business, you contract to a different lab on the university, right? Well, then that lab, it's really just a subcontract for them. Again, Joy in her office would certainly want to make sure that all of the conflicts are potentially managed there. The bigger problem or thing that's not allowed is if you are the main owner and interest owner in a company and you are the main academic PI. Does that make sense? It's basically, there's no way there then to parse apart whether or not the science is being done in a kind of like unbiased way. And the issue of kind of getting paid on both sides of the federal grant is the other big concern from the federal government. Does that help clarify? Or I mean, I can certainly talk about that more if that's not super clear. Jessica just dropped our mail address or our @mail address, our email address in the chat, as well as our website. Again, please go to our website. We've got a lot of resources on there. Our up-to-date programming is on there. Our intake form is on there. We're always more than happy to connect with you all and answer any of the questions. Is the university okay with faculty establishing their own business? Yes, but again, it has to be disclosed to the university. So I tell people, if you go to the SBDC and you do your registration, as soon as you click on the final button for your company to be registered, your next step should be making that disclosure to the university. Joy, anything else you wanted to add there?
I would say it might even save a step to get approval before even spending the time to get into the development process of, is it valuable to, you might want to check with your department to see, can I do this? And that will, again, vary from person to person and from department to department. The outside consulting approval process is a departmental process. So those are the folks that are going to know, you know, what kind of time you have available and how much, you know, they're willing to kind of allow you to step aside. And if that means, you know, taking leave from the university or changing your FTE, I mean, we've had situations of that, but you can certainly start your own business. But as soon as you are doing kind of any activity for the business, that's something that has to be disclosed. So doing it prior to starting, just to give yourself a better heads up is wiser, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Joy. That's really a helpful clarification there as well. All right, any other lingering questions? If not, again, this was Jessica. If you want to go ahead, you can end the recording now. Again, we did record this. We have the slides.